"My ex is coming to Christmas dinner with us this year." Tom said it so casually, as if he were asking me to pass the salt, not detonating a bomb in the middle of our kitchen. I stood at the counter, hands dusted with flour, the scent of cinnamon and roasting turkey swirling around me. For a moment I thought I'd misheard him, but when I looked up, Tom was already moving on, checking the oven timer, humming along to the carols on the radio, as if nothing in the world had changed. I felt the rolling pin slip from my fingers and clatter onto the counter. "Diane?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "You mean your ex-wife Diane?" He didn't even look at me. "Yeah, she's in town for the holidays. The kids thought it would be nice. You know, for old time's sake. She's family, Linda. It's just one dinner. Just one dinner." The words echoed in my mind, sharp and cold. I stared at the pie crust in front of me, suddenly unsure of what I was supposed to do next. I'd spent weeks planning this meal, making lists, polishing silver, pulling out the old ornaments the kids loved. I'd wanted everything to be perfect, to remind everyone that this was our home, our family, our tradition. And now, with one sentence, Tom had turned it all upside down. I tried to keep my voice steady. "You could have asked me first." He shrugged, finally glancing my way. "I didn't think it would be a big deal." "You're always so gracious, Linda. I knew you'd understand." Gracious. I forced a smile, the kind you wear when you're trying not to cry in front of your children. I could hear them in the living room, laughing over a board game, their voices bright and oblivious. I wondered if they knew, if they'd been part of this decision, or if Tom had sprung it on them too. I wondered if Diane knew how much space she still took up in our lives, even after all these years. I turned back to the dough, pressing it into the pan with hands that shook just a little. "Of course," I said, my voice too bright. "It's just one dinner," but inside I was unraveling. Memories flashed through my mind. Our first Christmas together. The way Tom had held my hand under the table. The way the kids had squealed over their stockings. I remembered the first time I met Diane, the way she'd smiled at me, all teeth and charm, the way Tom had looked at her when he thought I wasn't watching. I remembered every time I'd felt like a guest in my own marriage, every time I'd wondered if I was enough. I finished the pie, set it on the windowsill to cool, and wiped my hands on my apron. Tom was already gone, off to wrap presents or check the lights or do anything but talk to me. I stood alone in the kitchen, the house suddenly too quiet, the weight of what was coming pressing down on me. How would I get through this dinner? How would I sit across from Diane, smile for the kids, pretend that nothing was wrong? I didn't know, but I knew one thing: this Christmas would be different. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. As I forced myself to keep moving, setting the table, lighting the candles, arranging the centerpiece, I couldn't help but wonder how we'd gotten here. How had our family become a place where an ex-wife could walk in and take a seat at the table, where my feelings were an afterthought, where I was expected to smile and make it all look easy? I pressed my hands to the counter, took a deep breath, and told myself I could do this. I had to. But as I looked around the kitchen, at the home I'd built, I realized I wasn't sure who I was doing it for anymore. And as the clock ticked closer to dinner, I found myself thinking back to the beginning, to the choices and compromises that had led us to this moment, to the woman I used to be before I learned how easily a life could be rearranged, before I became the woman standing in her own kitchen, bracing for her husband's ex-wife to walk through the door. I was just Linda, newly married, full of hope, believing that love and hard work could build a family strong enough to weather anything. I remember those early years when Tom and I first blended our lives, and the promise of a fresh start felt as bright as the Christmas lights we strung together on our first little house. Tom and I met at a friend's backyard barbecue, both of us a little older, both carrying the weight of past heartbreaks. He was charming, with a laugh that made people lean in, and a gentleness that drew me in from the start. I was cautious, but he was patient. We talked for hours that first night, about everything and nothing, our favorite books, the best way to make chili, the dreams we'd put on hold for the sake of our children. He told me about Diane, his ex-wife, and the 2 kids they shared. I told him about my own daughter, Sarah, and the years I'd spent raising her alone. Our courtship was slow and careful, a dance of hope and hesitation. We met for coffee, for walks in the park, for dinners where we talked about what it meant to try again. When Tom finally asked me to marry him, it was on a snowy December night, the world outside hushed and sparkling. I said yes, believing that together we could build something lasting, something safe. Blending our families was never easy, but in those early days, it felt possible. The kids were wary at first, but we made it work. Movie nights on the couch, Sunday pancakes, summer road trips with too many bathroom stops. I worked hard to make our house a home, to create new traditions that belonged to all of us. I wanted Tom's children to feel welcome, to know that I wasn't trying to replace their mother, just to love them in my own way. Diane was always there, a shadow at the edge of every milestone. She called often, sometimes for the kids, sometimes for Tom. At first, I told myself it was normal, that co-parenting required communication, that it was better for everyone if we all got along. I invited her to birthday parties, sent her photos of the kids' school plays, even included her in holiday cards. I wanted to believe that kindness could bridge the gap between past and present. For a while, it worked. Our home was filled with laughter, with the chaos of blended family life. Tom and I hosted Thanksgiving dinners, decorated the tree together, watched the kids grow into their own. There were moments of real joy, Sarah and Tom's daughter Megan giggling over secret jokes, Tom's son Ben asking me for advice about girls, Tom and I dancing in the kitchen after everyone else had gone to bed. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. Diane's calls became more frequent, her requests more personal. She'd ask Tom for help with her car, for advice about her job, for favors that went beyond co-parenting. Tom always said yes, always with a smile, always insisting it was for the kids. I tried not to mind, tried to remind myself that generosity was part of who he was. But sometimes late at night, I'd lie awake wondering if there were parts of his heart I'd never reach. The kids noticed, too. Megan started spending more weekends at her mother's house, coming home with stories about Diane's new adventures, her new friends, her new life. Ben grew quieter, more withdrawn, his loyalties torn between two worlds. Sarah, always sensitive, asked me once if I missed the way things used to be before we all became a family. I told her the truth. I missed the simplicity, but I wouldn't trade what we had for anything. Still, the cracks widened. Tom and I argued more, about little things at first, then about Diane. I tried to explain how it felt to always come second, to always be the one making room. He'd listen, apologize, promise to do better. And for a while he would, but then another call would come, another favor, another reminder that Diane was never really gone. I worked hard to hold us together. I planned family outings, cooked favorite meals, wrote notes for the kids' lunchboxes. I tried to be patient, to trust that love would be enough. But sometimes when I caught Tom looking at old photos, or heard him laugh a little too easily at Diane's jokes, I wondered if I was fighting a battle I couldn't win. But there were signs Linda had ignored, signs that would soon become impossible to overlook. The way Tom hesitated before telling me about Diane's calls, the way Megan's stories about her mother grew more elaborate, more pointed, the way Diane always seemed to know things about our family before I did. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was being insecure, but deep down, I knew something was shifting. Now as I return to the present, I steel myself for the most difficult Christmas I've ever faced. I know the woman I am is not the woman I was when Tom and I first fell in love. But I also know that I am still here, still fighting for my family, still hoping that this holiday might bring us back together, or finally force us to face the truth. Now, as I return to the present, I steel myself for the most difficult Christmas I've ever faced. I know the woman I am is not the woman I was when Tom and I first fell in love. But I also know that I am still here, still fighting for my family, still hoping that this holiday might bring us back together, or finally force us to face the truth. The days leading up to Christmas were a blur of forced cheer and mounting dread. I baked cookies, wrapped presents, and tried to keep the peace, but the tension in the house was thick enough to taste. Tom was distracted, always on his phone, always stepping outside to take calls. The kids sensed something was off, their laughter a little too loud, their questions a little too careful. I told myself it was just the stress of the holidays, but deep down, I knew better. It was the night before Christmas Eve when I heard them. I'd gone upstairs to put away laundry, but as I passed the study, I heard Tom's voice, soft, intimate, the way he used to talk to me when we were first married. I paused, my hand on the banister, and listened. "I just want you to be happy, Diane. You know that, right?" Tom's voice was low, almost pleading. Diane's reply was muffled, but I caught enough. "It's been so hard, Tom. I never thought I'd feel this way again. I miss how things used to be. You always understood me." There was a long silence, broken only by the sound of Tom sighing. "I know. I think about it too sometimes. About what we lost. About what could have been." My heart hammered in my chest. I felt like an intruder in my own home, listening to a conversation that should have ended years ago. I wanted to burst in, to demand answers, but I couldn't move. I stood there, frozen, as Diane continued. "I just wish things were different. I wish I could go back. You were always the one who really saw me, Tom. I can't talk to anyone else like this, not even Linda." The words hit me like a slap. I realized in that moment that Diane had been confiding in Tom about things she'd never shared with me. That their connection, whatever it was, had never really ended. I felt a wave of anger and hurt crash over me, mingling with a cold, sharp fear. Was Diane here for the kids or for Tom? Was this Christmas dinner just a pretext for something more? I slipped away, my hands shaking, and locked myself in the bathroom. I stared at my reflection, searching for the woman I used to be. I saw the lines around my eyes, the worry etched into my face, the sadness I'd tried so hard to hide. I thought about all the years I'd spent building this family, all the compromises I'd made, all the times I'd told myself that love was enough. But as I sat there, the pain began to harden into resolve. I realized that I couldn't just stand by and watch Diane take back what I'd fought so hard to build. I couldn't let her rewrite the story of our family. Couldn't let her turn Tom's head with memories and regrets. I had to protect my marriage, my dignity, and the life I'd created. I spent the rest of the evening moving through the house like a ghost, watching Tom laugh with the kids, watching Diane's name light up his phone. I wondered how long this had been going on, how many secrets had been whispered in the dark while I was busy holding everything together. I wondered if the kids noticed, if they saw the way Tom's eyes softened when he talked about the past, if they heard the longing in Diane's voice when she spoke about family. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Tom's steady breathing beside me. I thought about the promises we'd made, the vows we'd spoken, the life we'd built from the ashes of our old ones. I thought about the woman I'd become, the woman who had learned to smile through disappointment, to forgive without being asked, to love without expecting anything in return. But I also thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who believed she deserved more, who believed that love was a partnership, not a consolation prize. I realized that I wanted her back. I wanted to fight for her, for the life she'd dreamed of, for the family she'd tried so hard to build. Could Linda protect her marriage and her dignity from the woman who once had it all? The question echoed in my mind as I wiped away my tears and stood up straighter. I decided, quietly and firmly, that I would not let Diane's unfinished business become the end of my story. I would find out what she really wanted, and I would do whatever it took to protect my family. As I left the bathroom and returned to the kitchen, I forced a smile for the kids and finished icing the cookies. But inside, I was already making a plan. I would watch, I would listen, and I would not let myself be blindsided again. The next morning, I woke to the sound of laughter drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, I let myself believe everything was normal, that the ache in my chest was just a bad dream. But as I padded down the stairs, I saw Diane at the stove, flipping pancakes, her hair pulled back in a way that made her look younger, more familiar. Tom stood beside her, pouring coffee, their conversation easy and intimate. The kids sat at the table giggling at some private joke. I hovered in the doorway, suddenly unsure of my place in my own home. "Good morning, Linda," Diane called, her voice bright. "I hope you don't mind. I thought I'd make breakfast for everyone." "Just like old times, right, Tom?" Tom smiled, not looking at me. "Diane makes the best pancakes. Remember, kids?" I forced a smile, my hands tightening around the edge of the counter. "Of course. Smells wonderful. I took a seat, feeling like a guest at my own table. Diane slid a plate in front of me, her eyes lingering just a moment too long. You look tired, Linda. Are you sleeping okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The conversation swirled around me, full of memories I wasn't part of, inside jokes I didn't understand. I watched Tom laugh at Diane's stories, watched the kids soak up her attention, and felt the distance between us grow wider with every word. After breakfast, Tom pulled me aside. Linda, I know this is hard, but can't you just be gracious? Diane's only here for a few days. The kids are happy. Isn't that what matters? I bit back the words I wanted to say. Of course, Tom, I'll do my best. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time Diane entered a room, I felt myself shrink. She offered to help with the decorations, to wrap presents, to take the kids shopping for last-minute gifts. She knew exactly where everything was, exactly how we did things. It was as if she'd never left. Diane's behavior became more brazen. She rearranged the ornaments on the tree, insisting they looked better her way. She corrected me in front of the kids, telling stories about Tom's childhood that made me feel like an outsider. She even brought up old family recipes, suggesting we change the menu just a little, for tradition's sake. Tom went along with it all, his eyes shining with nostalgia, his laughter a little too loud. I tried to talk to him, to tell him how I felt, but he brushed me off. You're overreacting, Linda. Diane's just being friendly. Why can't you let the past go? I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see what was happening. But instead, I smiled, swallowed my pride, and tried to keep the peace. I told myself it was just a few days, that I could survive this, that I was stronger than I felt. But at night, when the house was quiet, the doubts crept in. I replayed every conversation, every slight, every moment I'd let Diane take my place. I remembered the early days of our marriage, when Tom would come home late, smelling of Diane's perfume, his eyes full of regret. I remembered the way he'd promised me I was the only one, that the past was behind us. I wondered if I'd been a fool to believe him. Flashbacks haunted me. I remembered the first time Diane called after Tom and I were married, her voice sweet and apologetic. I just need to talk to Tom about the kids. I hope you don't mind. I'd handed him the phone, telling myself it was harmless, that co-parenting required communication. But the calls became more frequent, the conversations longer, the boundaries blurrier. I remembered the way Tom would defend her, telling me I was being unreasonable, that Diane just needed a friend. I felt guilty for resenting her, for wanting to keep Tom all to myself. I told myself I was being selfish, that I should be grateful for what we had. But as the days passed, I saw the cracks in our family growing wider. The kids started comparing me to Diane, asking why we didn't do things her way. Tom grew distant, distracted, his phone always within reach. I felt myself slipping, losing my grip on the life I'd worked so hard to build. But as Linda dug deeper, she uncovered a secret that changed everything. I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. The more I watched Diane, the more I noticed the little ways she inserted herself into our lives. She offered to help the kids with their homework, but I'd find her whispering with Tom in the den, their voices low and urgent. She volunteered to run errands, but always came back with stories about people she and Tom both knew, memories I wasn't part of. Even the kids seemed caught in her orbit, eager to please her, quick to compare my efforts to hers. One afternoon, I found Diane in the kitchen, scrolling through Tom's phone. She looked up, startled, but quickly recovered. "Just looking for a recipe Tom sent me ages ago," she said, her smile too bright. I nodded, pretending not to notice the tension in her shoulders, the way she slipped the phone into her pocket instead of handing it back. That night, I lay awake, replaying every moment, every word, every glance. I remembered the first Christmas Tom and I spent together, how we'd stayed up late wrapping presents, laughing over burnt cookies and tangled lights. I remembered how safe I'd felt, how certain I was that we were building something real. Now I felt like a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around the edges of my own life. The pressure to be gracious grew heavier. Tom would pull me aside, his voice gentle but firm. "Linda, can't you just try a little harder? Diane's going through a tough time. She needs us." I wanted to ask if he needed her, if he missed the life they'd shared, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded, promising to do better, to be the bigger person. Diane's behavior became bolder. She started making plans for the family without asking me, inviting old friends over for dinner, suggesting we all go ice skating, like we used to. She even brought gifts for the kids. Expensive, thoughtful things that made my own presents look small by comparison. The kids were thrilled, Tom was grateful, and I felt myself shrinking, my place in the family growing smaller with every passing day. I tried to talk to Sarah, hoping for some reassurance, but she was caught in the middle, torn between loyalty to me and the excitement of having Diane around. "It's just for the holidays, Mom," she said, her voice uncertain. "Dad says it's good for the family. Maybe you could try to get along." I wanted to scream, to tell her how hard I was trying, how much it hurt to be pushed aside. But I didn't. I just smiled, hugged her, and told her I loved her. Then I went to my room and cried, the sound muffled by the closed door, the family's sense of unity unraveled. Meals became tense, conversations stilted. Tom and Diane would reminisce about the past, laughing over stories I'd never heard, while I sat in silence, picking at my food. The kids grew quieter, sensing the tension, but not understanding its source. I felt like I was losing them, losing Tom, losing myself. But I also felt something else, a growing resolve, a determination not to let Diane take everything I'd built. I started paying closer attention, listening for the things that didn't add up. I noticed the way Diane always seemed to know what Tom was thinking, the way she anticipated his needs before I could. I saw the way she looked at him when she thought no one was watching, the longing in her eyes, the hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have him back. I began to dig, quietly and carefully. I checked Tom's phone when he left it unattended, scanned his emails for messages from Diane. I found nothing at first, just the usual updates about the kids, reminders about appointments, the occasional joke. But then I found a string of messages, hidden in a folder labeled Old Friends. They were from Diane, and they were anything but innocent. She wrote about missing Tom, about wishing things had turned out differently, about the pain of seeing him with someone else. She confided in him about her struggles, her regrets, her hopes for the future. Tom's replies were cautious but not discouraging. He told her he cared, that he wanted her to be happy, that he would always be there for her. My heart ached as I read their words, the intimacy of their connection laid bare. But as Linda dug deeper, she uncovered a secret that changed everything. In one message, Diane mentioned a plan, something she and Tom had discussed, something that would make things right for everyone. The details were vague, but the implication was clear. Diane wasn't just here for the holidays. She was here to reclaim what she'd lost, to rewrite the story of our family, to take back the life she believed was rightfully hers. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, my mind racing. I realized that I was in the middle of a battle I hadn't chosen, a battle I couldn't afford to lose. I knew I had to act to protect my marriage, my children, and myself from the woman who once had it all, and who was determined to have it again. But as I closed the laptop and wiped away my tears, I knew that the hardest part was still to come. I had proof of Diane's intentions, but I didn't know if Tom would believe me, if the kids would understand, if I was strong enough to see this through. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead, because as much as I wanted to run, to hide, to pretend that everything would work out on its own, I knew I couldn't. Not this time. Not when so much was at stake. The evidence was there, staring back at me from the screen, and it made my heart pound in a way I hadn't felt in years. I scrolled through Diane's messages to Tom, reading and rereading the lines that made my stomach twist. She wasn't just reminiscing about the past, she was plotting for the future. "We can fix this, Tom. We can be a family again. I know you still care. I know you remember what we had." There were hints of late-night phone calls, secret meetings, and a plan that would make things right for everyone. The more I read, the more I realized Diane wasn't just here for Christmas. She was here to reclaim her place, and she was willing to do whatever it took. But it wasn't just the messages. I found a folder tucked away in Tom's desk drawer labeled Finances. Inside were bank statements, credit card bills, and a series of withdrawals that didn't make sense. Money was missing from our joint account, large sums, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. There were receipts for expensive gifts, hotel stays, and dinners I knew nothing about. My hands shook as I pieced it together. Tom had been supporting Diane, quietly funneling money to her for months. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder open in front of me, and felt the weight of every decision I'd ever made. I thought about the years I'd spent building this family, the sacrifices I'd made, the trust I'd given so freely. I thought about the children, about how much they loved Tom, how much they looked up to Diane. I thought about the holidays we'd shared, the memories we'd made, the life I'd tried so hard to protect. And I wondered if it had all been a lie. The hardest part was knowing what to do next. If I confronted Tom, I risked shattering the family, forcing the children to choose sides, exposing them to a truth that could break their hearts. If I stayed silent, I risked losing everything, my marriage, my dignity, my sense of self. I was trapped between justice and mercy, between the need to protect my children and the need to protect myself. I replayed every conversation, every argument, every moment I'd let Diane into our lives. I remembered the way Tom had defended her, the way he'd brushed off my concerns, the way he'd promised me I was the only one. I remembered the look in Diane's eyes when she arrived for Christmas, the confidence, the certainty that she belonged. I realized I'd been blind, that I'd ignored the signs, that I'd let my fear of confrontation keep me from seeing the truth. But now, with the evidence in my hands, I knew I couldn't turn back. I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether to protect my children from the pain of the truth or to protect myself from the pain of another betrayal. I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who believed in love, in forgiveness, in second chances. And I wondered if she was still in there, somewhere, waiting to be found. Linda realized she was in over her head, but she couldn't turn back now. The secret was too big, the stakes too high. I decided to quietly gather more evidence, to document everything, and to seek advice from a trusted friend. I owed it to myself, to my children, and to the life I'd built to see this through, no matter how much it hurt. The day of the confrontation arrived with a strange, heavy stillness. I woke before dawn, unable to sleep, my mind replaying every message, every bank statement, every moment of doubt. I moved through the house in silence, setting the table for breakfast, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of the wind outside. I knew what I had to do, but my hands still trembled as I poured coffee and waited for Tom and Diane to come downstairs. Tom was first, rubbing his eyes, surprised to see me up so early. "You're up already?" he asked, trying to sound casual. I nodded, my voice steady. "We need to talk, Tom, all of us. Now." He frowned, sensing the seriousness in my tone, but before he could protest, Diane appeared in the doorway, her hair perfectly styled, her smile just a little too bright. "Good morning, Linda. Is everything all right?" I gestured to the table. "Sit down, please." They exchanged a glance but did as I asked. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything I was about to say. "I know about the messages, Diane. I know about the money, Tom. I know what you've both been hiding." Tom's face went pale. Diane's smile faltered. "Linda, I don't know what you're talking about." I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't lie to me. I've seen the emails. I've seen the bank statements. I know you've been planning something behind my back." Tom tried to protest, but I held up a hand. "No more excuses. No more secrets. I want the truth. Now." For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then Diane's composure cracked. "Fine, you want the truth? Here it is." I never stopped loving Tom. I thought if I could just remind him of what we had, he'd come back to me. I needed help, and he was the only one who ever really understood me. Tom's voice was hoarse. "Diane, stop!" But she pressed on, her eyes shining with a mix of anger and desperation. "You never belonged in this family, Linda. You were always just a placeholder. I was here first. I was supposed to be here forever." I felt my heart break, but I refused to let her see it. "You used my husband. You used my family. You lied to all of us," Tom buried his face in his hands. I'm sorry, Linda. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted to help Diane. I thought I could keep it separate, but I couldn't. I turned to him, my voice trembling. You betrayed me, Tom. You betrayed our marriage, our children, everything we built together. How could you? He looked up, tears in his eyes. I was weak. I didn't know how to say no. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was just running from the truth. Diane's anger turned to bitterness. You think you're so perfect, Linda. But you never understood Tom the way I did. You never made him happy. I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I was never enough for you, Tom. But I was always honest. I was always here. And I won't let you or anyone else take that away from me. The kids came downstairs, drawn by the raised voices. They stopped in the doorway, wide-eyed and silent. I looked at them, my heart aching. I'm sorry you had to hear this, but you deserve to know the truth. Tom tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. No, Tom, you need to decide what you want. You can't have both of us. You can't keep living in the past. Diane stood, her hands clenched into fists. You'll regret this, Linda. You'll regret pushing me out. I met her gaze, unflinching. Maybe, but I'd rather be alone than live a lie. The room was silent, the air thick with the weight of everything that had been said. Tom looked at Diane, then at me, torn and broken. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I know. But sorry isn't enough. Diane stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Tom sank into a chair, his shoulders shaking with sobs. The kids hovered in the doorway, unsure what to do. I went to them, pulling them into my arms, holding them close as the world we knew fell apart. But the fallout from this confrontation would change everything, for better or worse. The truth was out, and now we all had to face the consequences. As I stood in the wreckage of my family, I realized that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go of what's hurting you, even if it means losing everything you thought you couldn't live without. The days after Diane stormed out were filled with a strange, aching quiet. The house felt emptier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Tom barely spoke, moving through the rooms like a man lost in his own home. The children, sensing the shift, tiptoed around us, their laughter subdued, their questions unspoken. I tried to keep the routines going, meals, school runs, chores, but everything felt different, as if we were living in the shadow of a storm that had finally broken. Diane's absence was felt immediately. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't try to explain herself. But the consequences of her actions rippled through our lives. The truth about the money Tom had given her came out when the bank called to confirm a stop payment on a check. There were legal questions, awkward meetings with our accountant, and a long, uncomfortable conversation with Tom about the state of our finances. He admitted everything, how he'd tried to help Diane, how he'd lied to me, how he'd convinced himself it was all for the kids. The social fallout was just as swift. Word spread quickly through our circle of friends and neighbors. Some people offered sympathy, others kept their distance, unsure what to say. The kids' friends asked questions, and I did my best to shield them from the worst of it, but I knew they heard the whispers, saw the looks. I watched as Megan and Ben struggled to make sense of what had happened, as Sarah tried to comfort them, as Tom tried to hold us all together with apologies and promises. Tom was forced to make a choice. For days he seemed paralyzed, torn between guilt and longing, between the life we'd built and the life he'd left behind. He spent long hours alone, sometimes walking the neighborhood, sometimes just sitting in the dark. One night he came to me, his face drawn and tired. Linda, I'm sorry. I know I've hurt you. I know I've hurt the kids. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I want to try. I want to be here, with you, if you'll have me. I looked at him, searching his face for the man I'd married, for the man I still loved. I don't know if I can forgive you, Tom. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I know I can't keep living in the past. If you want to stay, you have to be honest. No more secrets. No more Diane. He nodded, tears in his eyes. No more Diane, I promise. It wasn't a clean break. Diane tried to reach out, sending letters and emails, sometimes begging for forgiveness, sometimes lashing out in anger. I ignored her, focusing on my own healing, on the children, on rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. Tom struggled too, but he kept his promise. He went to counseling, both alone and with me. He apologized to the kids, to Sarah, to Megan and Ben. He worked to earn back our trust, one day at a time. The family began to heal, but not without scars. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying the confrontation, wondering if I'd done the right thing. There were days when the pain felt fresh, when a song or a scent or a memory would bring it all rushing back. But there were also moments of grace, quiet dinners, shared laughter, the slow return of trust. I learned to forgive, not because Tom deserved it, but because I needed it. I learned to let go, not because it was easy, but because holding on was killing me. But could Linda ever truly trust her family again? The question lingered, a quiet ache beneath the surface. I wanted to believe that love was stronger than betrayal, that forgiveness could mend even the deepest wounds. I wanted to believe that the family I had fought so hard to protect could find its way back to each other. As the weeks turned into months, I found hope in the small things, a shared cup of coffee, a gentle word, the sound of the kids' laughter. I knew the road ahead would not be easy, but I was ready to walk it, one step at a time with my family by my side. The storm had passed, but the lessons remained, etched into the fabric of our lives, a reminder that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go of what's hurting you, even if it means starting over. The months after Diane's departure were a slow, uneven journey toward something like peace. The house, once filled with tension and secrets, began to breathe again. The children, at first wary and withdrawn, gradually returned to their old routines: homework at the kitchen table, laughter over board games, the easy comfort of family dinners. I found myself watching them, grateful for every small sign of healing, every moment that felt normal again. Tom and I moved carefully around each other, like dancers learning new steps. There were awkward silences, moments when the past threatened to intrude, but there were also honest conversations about what had happened, about what we wanted, about what we were willing to forgive. We went to counseling together, sometimes with the kids, sometimes just the two of us. It wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the hurt felt too deep to ever truly heal. But there were also days when I saw the man I'd married, the man who was trying, in his own flawed way, to make things right. I found new strength in myself, a quiet confidence I hadn't known I possessed. I started taking long walks in the park, letting the rhythm of my footsteps clear my mind. Sometimes I'd visit the old house where Tom and I had first started our life together, sitting on the porch steps and watching the world go by. I thought about the woman I'd been then, hopeful, trusting, a little naive, and the woman I was now. I realized that standing up for myself, even when it meant risking everything, had changed me. I was no longer willing to be an afterthought in my own life. My relationship with the children deepened in unexpected ways. Megan and Ben, once caught between two worlds, began to confide in me, asking for advice, sharing their fears and dreams. Sarah, my own daughter, told me she was proud of me, that she'd learned from watching me fight for our family. We created new traditions: Sunday breakfasts at the park, movie nights with homemade popcorn, quiet evenings spent reading together. The scars remained, but so did the love. I forgave Tom, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger that was holding me back. I forgave Diane, too, in my own way, wishing her peace, hoping she would find her own path. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about choosing to move forward, to build something new from the pieces of what had been broken. One afternoon, as the sun set over the park, I sat on a bench and watched the children play. Tom joined me, and for a while, we sat in comfortable silence, watching our family begin again. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on us." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. "We're all stronger than we think," I told him. "Sometimes it just takes losing everything to find out who we really are." But what would you have done in Linda's place? Would you have risked your family to stand up for yourself? Would you have forgiven or walked away? These are the questions I still ask myself, even now, as I watch my family laugh and grow and heal. The answers aren't easy. But as I walked home that evening, the world bathed in golden light. I knew that I had done what I needed to do, not just for Tom, not just for the children, but for myself. And in that, I found a new beginning. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you for listening, not just to what happened, but to the feelings and lessons that came with it. Sometimes, the deepest wounds come from those we trust most. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't facing an enemy, but facing the people you love when they let you down. I never imagined I'd be blindsided by my own husband, or that I'd have to fight for my place in my own family. But life has a way of testing us, and sometimes, the only way forward is to find your voice and stand your ground, even when it hurts. Have you ever been blindsided by someone you trusted? Have you ever felt like your years of love and sacrifice were suddenly invisible, or that your place in someone's life was quietly erased? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have fought for your dignity, even if it meant risking everything? Or would you have stayed silent, hoping things would change on their own? I know there's no easy answer. Every family is different, every story unique. But I hope my experience reminds you that your voice matters, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stand up for yourself, even when it's hard. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment when you had to choose between keeping the peace and doing what was right for you? Did you ever have to set boundaries with someone you loved, even when it meant walking away? Please share your story in the comments below. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs right now. And if this story touched you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with a friend. Our community grows stronger with every voice, every lesson, every act of courage. And if you think this story was powerful, just wait until you hear what's coming next. In our next episode, we'll reveal another family secret, one that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and forgiveness. You won't want to miss it. So, what would you have done in my place? I hope you'll join the conversation, because together we can find strength in our stories and hope in the truth. Thank you for listening, for caring, and for being part of this journey with me.